Hi everyone, it's Lynn Dion from Pink Whisper Designs. Today I want to show you a really simple way to get a beautiful stained glass look on your cards without a lot of work. And to do that, we're going to be using some brand new images from Art Impressions, and this is called the stained glass window set. We're going to be using that stained glass window, but you also get that beautiful church with this set as well. I'm going to grab some clear acetate. This one is from Fawn, and I cut this down to approximately 4 1/4 by 3 1/4. I'm removing that thick foam pad because, as you can see, this stamp is very thick. So we can get rid of that little foam pad in our mini Misty, and then I'm going to just place this down with some magnets. Now, because the acetate is quite staticky, I've got my little powder, anti-static powder bag, and I'm just going to pat that on all over. For ink, I'm using the VersaFine Clear ink, and this color is called Twilight, so it's a really beautiful dark blue, a dark navy blue. I've got my Stampendable stamp press. I'll just go ahead and press that out. And I'm taking my time pressing that out. I want to make sure I get a nice transfer of that ink. Once that's done, let's go ahead and emboss this. So this ink will stay wet long enough for us to put some embossing powder on it. And then this is a clear embossing powder, and I'm just tapping off any of that excess. And then I've got my heat tool. You do want to make sure you heat that up really well before you go to your acetate, because you want to emboss this fairly quickly so that you don't get too much curling on your acetate. Once that's done, I've got a clean, dry towel, and I'm just going to wipe off any of that anti-static powder. And you do want to make sure that acetate is nice and cool before you brush away that powder. Now I've got some beautiful glitter papers, and this is how we're going to create this pretty stained glass look. And these are also from Fawn, and this one is called Spring, and we're going to be using the blue and the yellow and then the light green, and then I was going to use that darker green from this set called Holiday, but I changed my mind afterwards. But I did still want to show that to you because you have lots of options for your glitter paper. I'm sure if you're like me, you've collected tons of it over the years. So just kind of pull out what you have and play around with that. Now I'm going back to that same ink, that Twilight color, and I'm going to stamp this a couple of times. On the glitter paper, I wanted to get a nice dark impression. I'm going to be cutting this out, and I want to make sure that I can see those lines nice and clearly. So let's go ahead and do the yellow. Same exact thing. I will stamp that a couple of times. And I am pressing down and again kind of holding it there for a second or two just to make sure I get a nice transfer of that ink. And then let's go ahead and do this last one. And there's where you see I took that darker one and I just set it aside. We are going to add a little shadowing to these glitter papers, so I didn't feel that I necessarily needed that darker one. So now that all three of those are stamped and ready to go, we're going to be doing some detail cutting. And here you can see that up close. So I'm going to grab my detail scissors and we're going to cut out certain areas of these, and we'll do some paper piecing. But first, let's go ahead and stamp this. Since we have the stamp out, let's go ahead and stamp this on a piece of Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock, and this measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'm just placing it in the center, maybe towards the top, just a little bit, but we'll be doing some more lining up of this image a little bit later on, so don't worry too much about that. So now I'm going to start off doing that ground area. And I'm cutting right on the line. So I'm going to grab this bottom section of the stamped area. And again, I've got some really nice detail scissors so that I can go right along that line. I am going to keep that portion of the frame. You do want to keep the frame. Now you could certainly cut that in a different color. You could use your X-Acto knife and cut that frame out separately. So now let's go ahead and cut this middle section. And there is that cross in the center, so that I'm just going to cut around that, and then I'll end up with 2 pieces of this blue. And I'm going to piece those back in. So this is just some simple paper piecing. Now you could certainly use lots of different colors here. You could do all different colors in that stained glass. You could do pinks and purples and really, really have some fun with this. But I wanted to keep this fairly simple, and the blog challenge for Art Impressions this week happens to be using the colors blue, yellow, and green. So when I saw this stamp set, I thought this would be perfect for that color combination. But again, you can add as many colors as you like. So now I've got this top section. I'm going to cut the little cross out of this section. And you may want to be more careful when you're cutting out these pieces if you want to use these leftovers for another card. I'll show you in the end what I had left over, and you could certainly use these to paper piece a second card. So let's go ahead and cut out the yellow sections. That cross will remain in the yellow. We're going to be, again, darkening these up just a little bit with some ink. So we're going to be adding some shadowing to these. This cross would also be pretty if you took like a dark copper or a gold glitter paper. That would be really pretty. But I kind of, again, wanted to stay in that color palette of the green, navy blue, and yellow. So that's why I'm sticking with these 3 colors. And now let's cut out that sun area. And again, this set has that beautiful church, and that would be wonderful with your watercolor sets. So you could do a beautiful scene with that little church. And these are the leftover pieces that I have that I can use on a second card. And I thought this card would be great for a confirmation or a communion, or even a sympathy card. Now these are the tiny blending tools from Tim Holtz. They have that little dome tip on them, and these are the additional applicator tools that you can purchase separately. So I will list and link all of those products down below for you, and also on my blog. Now here's where I decided to grab some Distress Oxide ink. This is the Rustic Wilderness, and I want to add a little shadowing to these. Now you do want to be careful when you're using your little foam applicators, because that glitter paper is kind of sharp, so you don't want to tear up that foam tip that you have. So I did end up switching over to my Pink Fresh Studios brushes. These are the 1/4 inch brushes, and I thought this was a little bit easier to apply that ink, but either way would work. But I would just be careful with the foam tip on your Tim Holtz tiny applicators. You don't want to tear up that foam. So again, I'm adding a little bit of shadowing. This just adds a little bit more dimension to the little paper pieces that we have. And that color I'm using now is called Chipped Sapphire. And these little brushes are great for getting into some of these smaller areas. You can really get in there in these little corners. And then for the sun, to do some shadowing on that, I'm going to go ahead and grab the Spiced Marmalade. Now another way to add glitter to your stained glass would be to use your actual glitters. And you can add some clear glue on the back side of your stained glass window and then sprinkle on your glitters. But I was looking for kind of an easy, quick way to add this glittery effect without a lot of work. You could certainly just color in the stained glass window and then add some clear glitter over the top of that entire piece. So there's several different ways of adding the glitter. I just thought this might be fun and easy to do. So let's go ahead and glue these down. We're going to take a little bit of time. We do want to make sure we line these up nicely. If you do end up with a few little gaps between some of these pieces that you're gluing down, don't worry too much, because that acetate piece that we're going to place over the top has all of the lines on it, so that'll fill in some of those little areas. So just do your best to line everything up as well as you can. And I'm using that Nouveau Deluxe adhesive to glue these down. And you can see that I have a little tiny gap there off to the right hand side, but again, that acetate piece will cover that. And then let's glue this last piece on top. And I put something heavy on that for a little while and let that dry. And then when I came back to it, I grabbed my sanding eraser because I saw that I had a few little smudges around the edges and some of that white will show. So with that sand eraser, I can just erase any of that excess ink that got smudged along the side. So now you can see our acetate piece will fit nicely right over the top of this. So I'm just checking to make sure that's going to line up really well. And now let's create the frame for this. So I've got my rectangle dies. I've taken the largest one and that 7th largest one. And these are the nested rectangle dies from Art Impressions. And I've got some navy blue cardstock. So this is that deep twilight color that we use for our ink. And I'm going to use my Post-it tape to tape down these two at the same time because we are going to be die cutting a frame. So I'm just centering that smaller rectangle inside that larger one, and then we can go ahead and run this through the Spellbinder's Platinum 6 die cutting machine. Once I had that frame, I wanted to add some texture to this. I've got the Sizzix Texture Fades embossing folder. This is from Tim Holtz, and this is called Arched. So it's going to really mimic that stained glass window really well. So I've placed my platform in my die cutting machine. I've got the embossing folder with the paper in there. And then I've got 2 pieces of cardboard. These are just from the backs of some old notepads. You could stack up some cardstock here, but you just want to make sure it's not too tight as you're running it through. If it's too tight, just back it out and take some cardstock off. Now you can see that beautiful design is mimicking that stained glass window. So let's go ahead and grab some double-sided adhesive tape. I wanted something nice and strong to hold this down. This is the 1/4 inch tape, and I'm going to apply that right around this frame. And then we'll go ahead and attach that acetate. I'm using my Cricut weeding tool. I like to press down the backing on that adhesive tape with the flat end of the tool and then use that little pokey end just to remove the backing. Now let's go ahead and center this. Once that's done, I'm grabbing some 3D adhesive foam tape and I'm going to place this all around the edges. I want this to pop up just a little bit so that when you're looking inside, you have a little bit of depth looking down into that stained glass window. Now, if you wanted to create a little bit of a shaker element at this point, you absolutely could. You just want to make sure that tape is edge to edge so that when you put your little shaker bits in there, they don't fall out. I'm not going to add anything inside. I'm going to remove the backing from that one side of the tape, and then for these 3 other sides, I'm just going to fold it back. I want to give myself a little bit of time to make sure I have this lined up just right, and then I'll pull that backing off. So now I'm just going to kind of center that. You can see I have excess paper left over. That's perfectly fine. We're going to cut that away. That's why you do want to stamp that image on the center of a larger piece of cardstock so that you have room to play around with this. And then I'm making sure that I line this up perfectly with that image underneath. Now I can grab my tweezers and just pull out any of that excess backing. Once I know that it's exactly where I wanted it to be, I can go ahead and press this into place. And look how beautiful that is and how easy this is to do. This is a lot easier than applying glitter, But again, you could add many different colors to this stained glass window and it would be absolutely gorgeous. So I've got a piece of yellow cardstock. This measures 4 1/4 by 11 inches, and I'm going to score that at 5 1/2 inches. And again, I will list these products and colors down below for you in case you're interested. They'll be linked and listed below and also on my blog. So now I've got this really pretty color combination. Again, this kind of lines up with the challenge that's currently going on at Art Impressions, and we'd love it if you would join us in this challenge. It's really fun to kind of force yourself to look at your products in a completely different way. Once I have that glued down, let's look at these. These are really fantastic. These are sentiment sheets from Art Impressions, and this one is called the Easter Journal 2024 series number 2, and it's just got some beautiful, beautiful religious sentiments on there. And I'm going to grab that one that says "He has risen." And then let's take a look at the journal template die set, which makes that cute little journal, and I've shown you this so many times. It's got all these little dies in it. We're going to grab this little one here, this little label die. And again, we're going to die cut that sentiment that says "He has risen." And I'll go ahead and tape that down and run it through my Sizzix Sidekick machine. And the lettering on this is kind of a blue-green color, so it's going to blend in really nicely with our project. I've got that little 1/4 inch round blending brush again, and I'm just going to go right around the edges of this little sentiment, and then let's go ahead and pop that up on the front of the card. I've got my little scrapbook.com foam squares. I'm going to place a few of those on the back. You can go ahead and remove that backing. Again, I'm going back to that Cricut weeding tool, and I just like to stick that pokey end right in there and pop those right off, so it's really easy to take those off. We'll center that, and then let's go back to that chipped sapphire ink and add some of that right around the edges. I just thought I would like to kind of bring your eye in towards the center a little bit more, so I'm going to use that tiny blending brush and go right around those edges. And then for a finishing touch, well, a few finishing touches, let's grab the bleed proof white ink, and this is a bright white ink, so I'm going to mask off my stained glass window and my sentiment because I don't want to get any ink on those at this point. So I'm just going to place a little bit of a paper towel over the top. I'll grab some of that ink and put it on my glass media mat, and then I'm going to spritz that with some water, and we'll go ahead and spatter that. And again, this is going to stay a really pretty bright white. I'm just using a tiny brush. That's a number 0 brush that I'm using so that we get some little tiny spatters. And I just thought this would bring everything together a little bit more. You could certainly spatter this with some glitter as well. You could take your Wink of Stella and squeeze some of that onto your glass media mat, add some water to that, and spatter this with a glittery effect. So that's up to you. And then I've got these buttons galore and more. These are the jewels, and these are the silver. These are just absolutely gorgeous. I'm just going to add one right here at the top. I just thought that would just bring, again, a little bit more interest to that sentiment. So again, I think this card would be great for Easter, of course, or a sympathy card, communion, confirmation. It's really fun and versatile, and that glittering is just so easy to do, but gives you such an elegant look. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.